Hello everyone, this is Ryan and this is lesson 2 of working with JavaScript. In this lesson we'll be learning how to work with the getElementById method and the innerHTML property. A method is basically a function that belongs to an object, and a property is a noun, whereas the method is a verb. So a property is more a attribute of a particular object. Okay, so in this lesson we're going to create a div tag with an ID. An ID is something that uniquely identifies something in HTML, and I've given it an ID of block. I've chosen to leave the div tag empty because we're going to use JavaScript to insert some text between the opening and closing div tags. I'm linking to lesson2.js, and we're going to flip over there and do a script. So document.getElementById and the name of the ID. Then I would say innerHTML, and I would put some text in between quotation marks. Okay, so let's just talk through this code quickly. Document is the name of the object. It's a built-in object. It's part of the document object model of the browser. Then getElementById is a function. You can tell that by the round brackets. So it's a verb in a sense. And any function that belongs to an object is actually known as a method rather than a function. But it's essentially the same thing. Then innerHTML is a property. So in this case, document.getElementById block will go and retrieve the entire div tag, the opening as well as the closing div tag. So we now this represents the div tag. The innerHTML property is now in reference to the div tag. So innerHTML simply means the contents between the opening and the closing tag. So we are setting that value equal to some text in between quotation marks. So a string will always go between quotation marks. And in this case I want to actually insert a little bit of HTML as well. So if I run this script, I do have one problem in that it's not actually running. So there must be an error somewhere. So we will need to go and open up our error console. In Firefox there's a tools menu. You can go to web developer. You can choose error console. Even better tool would be Firebug if you have it available. Otherwise I'll just choose error console. If you're sitting in Google Chrome, you can press F12. Same as in Microsoft Internet Explorer. Just press F12 and it will open up an error console that you can have a look at. And you should get the same error message. So here you can see we have an error message. It says document.getElementById is null. The reason for this is that the code has executed in the incorrect order. So let's take a look at this. In the order in which the code will execute is that the script will run first before the div has loaded. And the problem with that is the script is now searching for a non-existent ID. The ID hasn't yet loaded, and that is why it's saying it is the getElementById is null, because it doesn't yet exist. So to solve this problem, we need to build this into a function. I'm going to call the function init for initialize, but you can call the function anything you would like. A function is a block of code which will execute when it is called. It is between two curly brackets, opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. So to call this function, you would simply type init with round brackets. Of course, this leaves us with exactly the same error as before. It's going to still call this function and then execute this line of code before the div has loaded on the page. So to solve this problem, we're going to assign the call to an event handler called onLoad. So onLoad, being an event handler, would mean that when you assign a function to it, you need to remove the round brackets. The reason for this is that we do not want to call the function straight away. We rather want to wait for this event to have occurred before calling the function. So you might wonder, well, what is this event onLoad? It basically means that it will wait for the entire body section to finish loading before proceeding with calling that function. So in this case, the div will have to first load before the init function will trigger. And this basically solves our problem. I'm going to clear the console now, close it, and flip over to my web browser. And there you can see that the word testing appears in italics on the page and has been inserted using JavaScript. Let's quickly revise the code. This is just pure HTML. We link to a external script file, lesson2.js. We have a div in our document which is empty to start off with, and it is identified by an ID of block. And then with JavaScript, we wait for the body section to finish loading, including the div tag. We call the init function. The init function searches for an ID of block, which is the div tag, and using the innerHTML property inserts text between the opening and closing div tag. And that ends lesson 2 of working with JavaScript.